So, yeah, I am an economist, but don't worry. Normally when people hear that there's an economist coming up, their bodies immediately begin emitting massive amounts of serotonin to cope with the depression that we're going to put on you all. So don't worry, I'm not that kind of economist. I will take you into Mordor, but back out to the Shire again. Not to worry. Okay. So the question that I was asked, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak, and thank you all for coming. That I was asked is, consolidating the recovery. What can you do? What can you think about in order to forestall the kind of events that we have all had to live through? Well, I think really when you're an economist, you don't really think about small changes in GDP or small recessions. The economies go up and they go down. What we really want to avoid are the generation of more bubbles. So in particular, you want to avoid the generation of a new property bubble. You want to avoid the generation of bubbles in agricultural prices. You want to avoid a cattle bubble if there's too many cows in the system. Believe me, somebody talked about it very recently. There may be cattle bubbles out there. Particularly, if you're a policymaker, you want to avoid the problem whereby you drive the economy off a cliff, right? And so I know genuinely it's a big problem. And very often in the banking inquiry, I've been listening to it every day. If the banking inquiry is your radio, you want to be doing sit-ups or something to make yourself happier, to keep it together. But it has been my radio, and the theme that's emerging is we didn't really know. It wasn't us. I wish somebody had come and told me. Nobody shouted stop. We didn't hear any warning signs. So many of you will have driven up here, and I drove up here today, and I've never felt like a rally driver in my Ford Focus before. It was really fun. I enjoyed it. But many of you will have seen some of these warning lights. When I was in Trinity, hopefully not today, but when I was in Trinity, then Professor, now Senator Sean Barrett taught us transport economics, and he taught us about the idea that you can actually think about moving the economy up and down. If you're the government, you can spend more money and cause more economic growth. You can reduce the interest rate and change the amount of lending in society and so forth. It's very difficult to tell when the economy is overheating and when not. And very much there's a sort of a De Valera, I look into my heart and see there's a recession coming kind of approach. So can we think about better indicators? And in particular, how do these indicators actually come up? So I'm very interested in design, and particularly not particularly how you put these things together. So if you look at these symbols, I hope most of you know what most of these symbols mean, right? So if the kind of curly one came on in your car, see the curly one, the kind of yellow one in the middle, if that came on in your car, what would you do? Stop the car. Drive on. Half of you thinking, I don't even know what it means anyway. Keep going. Be grand. What about that? What about that one that looks like an engine? What about that one? If that one comes on, would you stop the car? What about the one with the key? Do you know what that is? The one, you've lost your key. You have no key. That's the child lock. Right? If the red oil light and the brake light and the engine light go on at the same time, and the temperature light goes on, your car is about 5 minutes away from seizing. Stop your car. Okay? Now, this is a motorized vehicle traveling at speed through space and time. It's not that difficult to figure out how these things work, but we evolved this display methodology. Each of you most of you have driven here. You have all seen these lights. I hope, again, not recently. But these did not come up. These did not form fully from the minds of designers. They were evolved over time. And these things, if you have them, tell you when to stop. If your fuel light comes on, you don't need to stop the car and, dial up AA instead of run out of gas. You've got another 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Be grand. Yes, I may have done this from time to time. You've got some leeway, right? So I want to show you some pictures. The next couple of pictures I'm going to show you are the displays, the dashboards of vintage cars. Okay? This is a Ford Model R from 1900. Note the minimalist dashboard. There's a whirr noise, that's it. Couple of reasons for this, ladies and gentlemen. You're exposed. There is no glass here. You can't go that fast. Second off, pretty much everybody in this room could repair that engine. It is that simple to do. Maybe not me, but I could maybe do it with YouTube or whatever. I could probably have a go. But the other thing as well, this car spent most of its life stopped. It broke down that often. Okay? Now this is a Ford Model T from 1910. Notice, again, not much going on. This is a Ford Model A from 1920. Notice there are now 3 dashes. There's a brake. There wasn't a handbrake in any of the other 2. You just stopped your car. And you can see we're getting slowly better. Here's the Ford Model 48 from the 1930s. 3 or 4 dashboard icons. Here's the Ford Super Deluxe from 1942, the first genuinely all-electric car. Again, you can see it's getting better. This is a Ford Thunderbird from 1950. Very zippy red interior. You know, whoever was driving that was going fast. By the way, fast was about 40 kilometers an hour at the time. But anyway, you can see more and more instrumentation. This is a Ford Galaxy from the 1960s, again. Ford LTD from 1970, you know, super fancy. Ford Crown Victoria LX from 1980. We're getting into the eras. Ford Mondeo from 2004. This thing looks like 2001, The Space Odyssey, relative to the first one, right? And this is a Ford Taurus from 2013. Okay? This is an evolution over a 90 to 100 year period. Now it had to take place, several innovations had to take place at the same time. Electronics, sensor technology. The fact of the matter is the Ford Taurus can do about 190 kilometers an hour if you're in a place where you can do that. You can go that fast. The Ford Model T is not going at that speed. Okay? Now, if you had to take a guess at the kind of monitoring and sensor mechanisms we have built into the Irish economy, would you say we are a 2013 Ford Taurus? Or something slightly less advanced? Indeed. And so I would say that what has happened over the last couple of years, especially since we now live in an era of financialization, where finance is becoming more and more and more important. We're an incredibly small, open economy, which means when the economies of the world flex, we kind of react to it. We're an incredibly successful, small, open economy, which I think is, we often beat ourselves up, but you know, there are many people who would love to live in this country. But we don't have adequate ways to understand what's going on. So I was reading Homer's Iliad to my kids recently, and it's amazing. It's an amazing book because it's just basically one big long fight, right? There's a couple, there's a couple of the gods come in here and then, but it's basically one gigantic Michael Bay film. Do you know, like this? Imagine the stupidest film you've ever seen. That's the Iliad. It's just battles constantly and incredibly gory, which is how you keep a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old interested. But I was very interested in the Iliad because there's this persistent allusion to what are called the wine dark seas. And I never understood why. Wine dark seas. This is taking place in Turkey, 3,700 years ago. Wine dark seas. The Aegean is blue. Like there's no point in which it's not. So Homer's Iliad is shot through these wine dark seas. And I give you the Greek there for the Greek scholars in the audience. But he says, and now jealous of me, you gods, because I befriend a man, one I saved as he straddled the keel alone, when Zeus had blasted and shattered his swift ship with a bright lightning bolt out on the wine-dark sea. And you're going, why didn't he just call it the blue sea? The sea was blue. Why didn't he call it the dark blue sea, the azure sea, whatever? The scholars think now, wasn't blue invented in 3700 BC? It turns out probably not. There is no, they think the color orange was invented in the 16th century. We have a tendency to think that our vocabulary is what has always existed. This is not the case. Scholars think there's something called linguistic or conceptual relativism. Not to get all academic on you, but basically they didn't have the word blue, so the closest thing was wine dark. This is why when the conquistadors came over on their ships, they were welcomed as gods, not because they looked so amazing, but because they seemed to walk on water, because they had never seen those they ended up conquering had never seen ships before. So, okay, why is this important? Why am I wrecking your heads this late in the evening with Homeric linguistic relativism? You're like, there's your man with his linguistic relativism. You know, 'tis far from linguistic relativism he was raised. But that's true. But anyway, why in dark seas are very important? Because if you lack language to describe a phenomenon, and the phenomenon happens to you, you're in trouble. You need the language to actually describe it. If you don't have it, you're important. These important phenomena pass you by. You miss their importance. We missed the importance. Economists missed the importance of the build-up of what's called securitization and the derivatives trade in the early 2000s. We completely missed the problem of the deep interconnection of financial systems. That's the key issue that caused the global financial crash, not the Irish financial crash. Our financial crash was caused by us trying to sell bits of our country to each other using money we borrowed from other people. That's the whole thing. Let's try not to do that again. We'll just all not. We can all go home. So how do you organize this? I want to give us an organizing framework and a theoretical lens. Not only do you make sure that key insights are acted upon, but you actually have the empirics to back it up. All right. So this basically comes from, this idea comes from a very old, or relatively old idea from von Humboldt. So language completely determines thought. He says humans live mainly with objects, even exclusively so as language conveys them. You are literally the words that you speak. Okay, so what I want to show you here is some visualizations that I and the guys that work for me in my lab have developed. So you are the first people outside of our little group of nerds to see this. I think maybe one other person in this room has seen it. Sarah, one of our former MSc students. Our current MSc students, actually, she hasn't finished her thesis yet. Finish the thesis, Sarah. Sarah's dad is here too. Dad, make her finish the thesis, yeah? Okay, she will. She's a very good student. So we're very proud of her. I want to show you this. I want to show you a way that we've developed to see the Irish economy in a different way. This is the first time this has ever been seen at McGill. Okay, so loads of people have tried to look at this before. This is a survey of the literature. The slides will be available online. Trust me, I've read it. It's grand. Moving swiftly on. There are loads of different ways to visualize the crisis. But one of the key ideas, I think, that I want to bring across to you is the idea of information density. So many of you will have seen time plots where there's a line and it's going over time. And the horizontal axis is time, let's say 1990 to 2009, whatever. That line plot has an informational density of about 40. Okay, there's a guy called Edward Tufte has defined these things. What I want to do is increase, and that's, by the way, the kind of data that government ministers look at all the time. The line goes up, the line goes down, GDP went up, unemployment went down, and so forth. Very little information. I want to show you data displays that have information densities of 1600. 42 versus 1600. Genuine, large change. And what's important as well is, not only are these theoretical, I'm going to show you the data for the Irish economy. You'll be interested, I hope. All right, so we got this from the quarterly national and financial accounts from 2002 to 2014. We created a bucket load of new computer code to actually do this. It's not simple. We made it stock flow consistent. Doesn't matter what that is. We just checked that everything came from somewhere and goes from somewhere. You might think, doesn't it already? No, it doesn't. It does now, but it didn't there. It cost us 350 grand to make it stock flow consistent, but we did. All right. This is what it looks like. If you look on many of you can't see the back, I'm sorry. There's deposits, bonds, loans, equities, insurance and technical reserves, other accounts. That other used to be very small, now it's very big. And we have the net financial position. So you can see there's incomes and expenditures for households, for financial corporations. The central bank is in there too. The non-financial corporations, that's things like Steve's second-hand bookshop, but also, Microsoft, they're all in there. And we've got the government's income, which is your taxes, and expenditure, which is my salary. Thank you very much, by that way, taxpayers of Ireland. Cheers. That was wonderful. And expenditure from the rest of the world, which is obviously, the rest of the world. Okay. So heat maps and tree maps. So we've created these two things. Now they're not the idea of a heat map and a tree map. They're not new ideas. But I'll give you a good idea here. We were going from a data density of 40 to 50, all the way up to 1800. in these graphs. Okay? So a heat map is a correlation matrix. We see if things move at the same time. If things move at the same time together, they're positively correlated. If they move at the same time negatively, they're negatively correlated. So they move like that, move against one another. Think about ice cream sales in November, right? The weather goes like that, the sales go like that, all right? That's a correlation matrix. We get the inflows into the system and the outflows, and we just map them. And with tree maps, you can display hierarchical data, so the amount of money that the government spends in a given year, this year it'll be about 50 billion, what does it spend it on? It spends 73% of the total expenditure of the country is spent on education, health, and social protection. So there'll be three big boxes that you'll see in here. I'm going to look at it all from the point of view of finance. So I don't expect you to read the rows and the columns on this. Just trust me on the size. What you're looking at here is the correlation matrix of the entire Irish economy. Not just GDP or unemployment or anything else. You're like, oh, I know, right? I know. You're like, that's it? 300 grand and this is what you got? Really? We went out a lot. There was a lot of wine. It was good. Okay, so to print this thing out on full scale would require something that size. It's gigantic. Okay. All I want you to do is look at the top right-hand corner of both figures. They represent the same thing. They're averaged over from 2002 to 2007, 2007 to 2014. That top right-hand corner is the correlation of wages with output. So I get my wages in, but they're paid by the University of Limerick, which has a wage bill. So wages received versus wages given. And you can see that during the build-up of the boom, there's also social contributions. That is quite literally the entire household sector. Okay? So what you're looking at is a statistical description of what we heard just earlier on. Okay? You can see it happening. So compare 2002 to 2007 to 2007 2014. You can see austerity. We don't need anecdotes. We have data. Anecdotes are important. Stories are vital. But this is the kind of thing you need if you want to run a country. Now that's the household sector. You can literally see it falling apart. Okay? That's the household sector. Down in there somewhere we have something called interest on dividends. That doesn't sound very interesting. Well, if you have shares, you will be interested. You can watch those collapsing as well. You can watch money coming in and out of the economy. This is just an average, but we actually have real-time data on this. I'm just showing you something that we cook up to give a kind of a sanity check on us. And I think this is really, really useful. Now let me show you something else. This is a tree map. You're going to see the assets of the entire Irish economy on one side and the liabilities on the other. You all have balance sheets. The assets are what you own, the liabilities are what you owe. Yeah? So the Irish economy is no different, and this is the financial side of it. What you're going to see is a snapshot in time every quarter from 2002 to 2014. And again, you're the first people to see this, and let's all cross our fingers and hope this actually works. Okay. Can you see it flexing? Okay. What you're watching is a video of the Irish economy evolving over time. On the left, you have the assets. On the right, you have the liabilities. Look at deposits, for example. They increase massively up to 2000, and then they shrink way down because people are thinking, they'll default. Let's get the money out. That's precisely what's happening. You can see the deposits in the rest of the world expanding. Long-term loans are expanding. You can see shares changing over time. My point, ladies and gentlemen, is not that this is a cool illustration, but you are watching quarter by quarter as the economy changes shape and the proportions within it change shape. I happen to think this is really, really cool. It's a you might be going, really? Really? This is like having one of those lights in the car. Okay? If you're the Minister for Finance or the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, you really want this. Okay? You want to know how these things are changing as a proportion of total expenditure. It's very, very important. So, for example, if you had this data in 2006, you would have seen deposits were expanding, but the growth of new loans was changing. There were no more new loans being created in 2006, ladies and gentlemen, or very few. The ratio of change was very, very fast. So I think it's important. While this is still back-quoted data, it shows you that the economy is an incredibly complex object, and proxying it using things like GDP is a mistake. Now I want to show you another project we've been involved in. We've been looking at Iceland, the Icelandic system, and I have two people working for me looking at this particular thing. And what we've done is we've visualized the entire Icelandic story as one wheel. Okay? Again, I don't expect you to see all the detail. The slides are, I think, available online now or soon. And so what you'll see is this. So if you just look at the top, you see these little dots, and they're expanding and they're turning into big dots. They're the size of the banking system in Iceland. Okay? So it started off being about 80% of GDP, and it finished off 800% of GDP. Nobody in Iceland knew this was happening except the people who were making a fortune from it happening. You see at the bottom the 5 sectors of the Icelandic economy: households, non-governments, governments, non-financials, financial corporations. And you can see the change, light blue to dark blue. This change is massive in the non-financials. What actually happened was the corporate sector took on loads and loads and loads of debt, which is why they were able to default on so many things so quickly. In the Irish case, the household sector did all the building up of the debt. As I said, the process was we bought bits of our country and sold it to each other. And what I want to show you here is that the banking system and the different sectors of the economy interact all the time. And if we're clever about it, we can use the data that exists already in order to give policymakers more information so that they can avoid the next bubble. Okay? They will no longer be able to say, nobody told me, I didn't know, I wish somebody had told me. They won't be able to say that because this stuff exists now and it's publicly available. We're also able to see things called flow spaces. So what you can see here is that yellow line. That yellow line is the proportion of household expenditure at the start of the year. And you can see that that moves on and becomes the consumption firms over time. So I get money from the University of Limerick, again, thank you all very much, and I rock out and I go off and I buy a few pints tonight, and that helps me. I'm consuming the alcohol and becoming less boring, hopefully, and maybe not, who knows. And people are like, you're coming from a low base, Stephen. But that's so my income is somebody else's expenditure. Okay, and you can see that the firms then give a lot of money to the households because the households are mostly employed by firms. Okay, and the government does all of this. So we can see these things over time, these beautiful flow spaces, and they're really gorgeous when you see them evolving over time. It looks like waves. Finally, we can do things like we can look at the credit structure, the credit network. So this thing on the left, this is what the economy would look like if every bank and every credit union was the same size. But they're not the same size. AIB has 40% of the mortgage market in Ireland. And so it looks much more like this. This on the right-hand side, where you have massive, massive financial entities. And then very small ones, credit unions, very small localized financing entities. And these community structures, by understanding these community structures, we can decide whether a bank is systemic or not. I'm fairly sure that if they had this picture on the night of the guarantee, they would have done something entirely different with Anglo-Irish Bank, because Anglo-Irish Bank was out there somewhere. Okay? And here we can see what happens when they evolve and their different community structures. Let me finish. So policymakers need better tools to actually see the next crisis, okay? To forestall a property bubble, an asset bubble, a cattle bubble, whatever you're having yourself, okay? These tools can be built on visualizations they can be done in real time. They can be done right now. All this stuff is available for free because the taxpayer paid for it. They're theory free. There's no regressions. There's nothing fancy going on. I'm just taking data and showing it in a different way. But ultimately, it's down to the driver to stop their car. Okay? It's down to the driver. You can only warn. If the big yellow light's coming on and you're ignoring it, is it the car's fault? No. Is it Ford's fault if you ignore the light? No, not really. But you know what you'll have? You'll have a blown up car. And when the guy from the AA comes out and asks you what happened, and you say, I just kept driving, even though the steam was coming out of the engine and everything else, well, that's a problem. So you need appropriate language, appropriate visualizations. We need to figure out a way how to stop the car, and that's how you manage the recovery. You manage the recovery by making sure that it's actually happening on the ground in real time, and you do that by having appropriate measures. Without signals, things are much harder to manage. So thank you very much. I'll leave it there.